One thing I always tell people getting started in retro gaming is to get yourself any CRT, then just connect your consoles with whatever cables came with it. While that's solid advice, there's a few problems. First, most people don't have the space to set up a dedicated retro gaming area around a CRT. Also, even if you built a whole room around your setup, what if you want to use your existing stereo along with it? I've been using a really cool solution for years that could help both casual gamers getting started or even professional monitor enthusiasts. Let's take a look at building yourself a retro cart. One of the first pages I wrote for RetroRGB.com was showing my process for making a retro cart, a multi-shelf cart on wheels that allowed you to tuck it away when not in use that barely took up any space. In fact, I've used a similar solution in every apartment I've lived in, and it always worked out. Most of my small apartments had absolutely no extra space, so we would just keep the cart in the living room, and it was actually kind of cool. It turned into kind of a neat, nerdy conversation piece when friends came over. And whenever we had family over, I would just roll it in the bedroom and close the door. Out of sight, out of mind. Over the years, the concept behind it has evolved along with the website. At first, I used a rolling rack made for restaurants, but that required me to trim the legs to be at the correct height for gaming. This contained every console I wanted to play, at the time at least, and a consumer CRT. This project quickly evolved into a bigger cart, an RGB monitor, and even more consoles. And then, as my CRT collection started to grow, I used the same carts to wheel over whichever monitor I wanted to use. While those carts Cousin Scott and I built were great, after testing many different types, we discovered wire shelving racks were an excellent, inexpensive option that let you set each shelf at whatever height you'd like. Metal AV carts are also excellent, but not for all situations. For this video, I'd like to show you my suggestions for different types of configurations depending on what display you're using and what your overall setup is like. And for the record, all of these silver wire racks also come in black. When I got mine, only silver was available, and then of course I had to buy all the rest of them to match, but in my personal opinion, I would have thought it would have looked a lot cooler if they were all in a matte black finish, but totally up to you. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, let's say you've decided that you want to add a CRT to your setup. Maybe it's because of video games or watching old TV shows, but regardless, the first step is always the same. Find any CRT you can for the cheapest price or free. Definitely avoid Craigslist scalpers and other bottom feeders trying to take advantage of people.
Telling me's dreaming.
You could still find basic CRTs or even VGA CRT monitors for near free. The only suggestion I'll make is if you live in a city, you'll want ones with at least the yellow composite jacks. If you're out in the burbs, even the ones with just the RF screw on the back should still be fine. Then measure the size of the TV and get yourself a rack or cart to match its size. There's two types I found to be my favorite, and there's a few things to note about it, so let's go over them here. First is a small metal AV cart. You'll want to get the smallest one you could find as they tend to be really tall since they were normally used in classrooms and boardrooms. These are great if you're just looking for something to put one large monitor on or to use for small, basic setups. Let's show an example of that. I'm just going to place a small TV on one side, the console on the other, and plug everything in. Depending on how you sit, you could orient this any way you'd like. Also, many of these carts come with a mini power strip built in, like you see here, so cable management is minimal. And that's basically it. If you're only planning on playing one or two consoles, the whole setup might be cheaper than using an upscaler, plus it's a true original experience. Heck, for consoles like the Dreamcast or GameCube, you could even use an old PC monitor you might have lying around with minimal connections involved. And it's small enough to even fit in a closet. Now, of course, you could get creative and try to add in some shelves or just put more consoles on the bottom shelf, but most people would probably want a more expanded solution that allows for adding more things to it. So let's take a look at integrating a wire rolling cart instead of a metal AV cart. Depending on your needs, you could probably just get a giant floor-to-ceiling one, add the TV in the middle, and use the rest for storage, but this video is about building dedicated rolling carts, so let's stick with that. One thing to note is most of the weight of a CRT is in the front, So as long as all the feet are placed on a surface, it's totally fine if the back part hangs off the edge. You don't need to find one to cover the entire depth unless that fits your setup best, or you're worried about someone bumping into the back. If you're using a wire rack, you'll want to adjust the height of the top shelf so the monitor is in the perfect spot. First, sit wherever your main gaming location will be. I'll use my couch here and measure from the floor to your eyes. You'll want to adjust the rack so the middle of the CRT is about at the same height. This is what I was talking about before about AV carts that are too high. You don't want one that's way over your head, otherwise it's going to be a very uncomfortable viewing experience. I also like to put a piece of wood over the top of the wire racks, but that's totally up to you. It's not necessary, but it'll help distribute the weight better, and I like how it looks. Then I just place the TV right in the middle. Next, set the height of the shelves below it to fit whatever you'll be storing there. Plan ahead and leave some extra room because these setups tend to grow pretty quickly. I'd also pick up a decent power strip and zip tie it in place. Then run all your power cables around and keep those neatly managed. Now, if your TV only has one input, it's probably easiest, at least when starting out, to just leave the wires tucked behind your console and connect each one at a time whenever you need to use it. Now, I am a massive fan of switches, especially ones that were designed with retro gaming in mind, but there is nothing wrong with just plugging in one at a time whenever you need it. It'll certainly save you money getting started, and it only takes a few seconds to swap between them. On the flip side, if the TV has multiple inputs, you could try to connect your consoles all at the same time like I'm showing here. I'll start by connecting the NES to the TV's RF input. Now that I'm out of Manhattan, there's barely any interference, and it'll look almost the same as composite video. Also, RF only supports mono audio, but the NES is mono, and so is this TV, so that really won't matter. Next, I'll connect the SNES to the composite video port and combine both stereo audio channels into the single mono input. Now, just power everything on and use your TV's input button to select between the two. And that's basically it. I have to pause for a quick technical warning. It is never okay to use a Y cable to connect two consoles to the same video input. It doesn't matter if only one is turned on at a time, it'll put twice the resistance on the line and hurt either the TV or the console, or both. In fact, there's almost never a situation where it's okay to use a Y cable with video signals, for splitting or 2-into-1. That said, Y circuits are totally safe to use with audio. You might get a slight buzz or hum, but there's zero safety risk for your equipment. I have a detailed video showing you why if you're interested, but just remember, never use a Y cable with video. Now, while you can't combine video signals into the same input, you can daisy chain multiple RF connections if needed. Here's an example. Let's say you have an Atari 2600 and an NES. You could connect both their RF adapters to each other and then the TV. As long as you only power one on at a time, it'll be totally safe and work fine. Note that this is not a Y circuit, this is just daisy chaining RF adapters. The more you add, the worse the signal will be, but for two consoles, it should be totally fine. And that's pretty much it for a basic setup. Whenever you want to play your retro games or watch old TV shows, just wheel the cart over and plug it in. And the wheels make this experience so much easier. Are you watching an old TV show? Pull the TV up close, and it'll take up as much of your field of vision as a bigger TV. Want to play a light gun game? Push it a bit farther away for more of a challenge. Also, let's say someday you decide to get a bigger CRT. No problem, just rearrange it so the whole top shelf contains the CRT, and everything else is tucked below. Then, when you're done, hide it away and don't worry about it, although it's much harder to hide it with a bigger TV on it. And look, obviously the solution isn't for everybody. In fact, I think just setting up a folding table in the corner of a back room or basement might be an easier way for some people to start out, but I really do think this is an awesome setup for a lot of people out there, and not just for beginners. Let's check out some examples of some more advanced setups. Even if you've decided you're a hardcore CRT enthusiast, having a rolling rack could still be a huge advantage. Now, I'm about to show the exact opposite of the setup I just showed, but please don't think you have to go this extreme. I just wanted to show both ends of the spectrum, and you can pick and choose whichever things that you like or are more important to you on yours, and just kind of use these as a guide. The featured piece in this setup will be a Sony BVM A20 RGB monitor. We'll place that right in the middle, and as you can see here, it sticks out the back. As long as you're not worried about a kid or a pet bumping into it, this will be totally fine. As I showed before, most of the weight is in the front of a CRT, so having just the rear portion hanging off the back won't cause the cart to tip or become unstable or anything. Next, we'll take two awesome Ascend Acoustic magnetically shielded bookshelf speakers and place them alongside. Now, of course, you could just use some shielded PC speakers if you'd like, but I want to show the Expert Extreme option here. Regardless of what speaker you choose, please remember to only use fully shielded speakers near CRTs, or you could permanently damage them. I have a whole video all about this with all the info you'll need, so please check that out before just putting random speakers there. As a note, the speaker height should also be centered to your head, so if for whatever reason they're a bit too low, just stick a book underneath or something. Then on the next shelf, I have the amazing NAD 2-channel amp for audio, as well as some consoles and a G-SCART switch. I'll place a power strip and more consoles on the bottom shelf as well. Now I'll just organize all my favorite equipment on each shelf and try to make everything fit. I'll also use the best cables possible for each console, since we're trying to get the most out of this setup. For this demo, I'll show RGB SCART cables all routed through an automatic G-SCART switch. Just a quick note, some consoles require a modification for RGB output, and others output the signal simply by plugging a cable in. Please check out the console section of RetroRGB.com for all the info you'll need on each one. For any beginners that happen to be watching, I just want to make sure I'm absolutely clear that you do not need any expensive, fancy cables or mods to have an excellent retro gaming experience on a CRT. Just the cables that your console came with would be more than enough. But if you've purchased a professional video or broadcast video monitor, you're absolutely going to want to go the distance and do all of the upgrades to get the most out of all of that equipment. And if you happen to do all that and put it on a rolling cart, you have what I like to call an RGB cart. While this is just as simple of a concept as the retro cart, everything about this is next level. That combination of amp and speakers provides one of the best 2-channel audio experiences for the money that you could buy. That particular BVM also supports all resolutions from 240p to 1080i, covering video signals from the dawn of the TV era up to modern HD TV signals. This is basically most old-school nerds' dream setup. In fact, I know quite a few people who've built entire rooms around this exact configuration, but this one's on wheels and can be moved to your room of choice or hidden away when you need it to be. You can also add a VCR, cassette player, and maybe even a PlayStation 2 or Xbox for both gaming and DVD playback. And now you'll have an absolutely amazing 2-channel audio setup, as well as a great, authentic CRT experience. Old TV shows will look exactly as they were intended, and all classic game consoles can just be connected with the highest quality signals they provide. You don't have to spend a fortune on an RGB monitor, though. If you love a good 2-channel audio setup for music, and also want to enjoy a fun retro CRT experience, just build the same setup with a consumer-grade TV instead of a fancy monitor. You'll even save money on the more expensive cables, but still have an amazing analog audio and video experience. I honestly think this is probably the setup many of you will end up with, as everything on here's combined costs is less than just the cost of that BVM that I showed, with the only difference being video quality. Something that matters much less with CRTs than flat panels. Really, just mix and match what's important to you. Heck, maybe you'll decide audio is more important to you than video, and you'll swap that CRT out with a record player. More on that in another video, though. One of the last examples I want to show is another way these rolling carts have made my life so much easier over the years. Let me paint a picture for you. Let's say you already have an awesome surround sound system with all of your consoles hooked up, all running through a projector or a really nice flat panel. If you do, you're not going to want to rebuild all of that on a second setup, so why not take your favorite CRT monitor, put it on a rolling rack, and only wheel it over when you need it. You have to plug it in each time, but I just left wires underneath my TV stand just out of sight, then slid them out when I connected my CRT. Now you could have a dedicated monitor for light gun games, old TV shows, and the occasional old movie with tons of film grain, but just wheel it away when you're done. I've done this in a few places I've lived, and it worked out really nicely. To be honest, I even kept the CRT right next to the main TV and almost never felt the need to hide it. But it was on wheels, so when I had to pretend I'm a boring adult with no life left in me, I could just roll it in the other room and hide it next to my guitars. And another use? What if you're crazy like me and enjoy having a collection of a bunch of different types of CRT monitors? While I love the way this CRT wall behind me looks, it's definitely more form than function. Back when I had a RetroRGB office in Brooklyn, I had a wall of consoles, speakers, and anything else I needed all set up, with just a tiny test monitor on it. Then I'd have a BNC cable coming out of my G-SCART switch, always sitting there waiting for me. This way, whenever I'd want to play a game or watch a movie, I'd wheel over the CRT that I felt was the perfect match for the moment. I had a dedicated cart for all the most important monitors, but I'd always have a floater cart ready in case I needed to test any other monitor I had. I could just grab it off the shelf, throw it on the spare cart, and wheel it over. To be honest, if space wasn't an issue, that's exactly the setup I'd have here. The biggest TV would be the permanent centerpiece, then I'd have all the others on their own wheel cart for when I wanted to try them instead. And since they're on wheels, I could bring them closer to the couch when necessary, always getting the perfect distance from my eyes, regardless of size. That's a bit extreme, but hey, I bet at least one of you watching will do that. As I've already said a bunch of times in this video, maybe putting everything on a rolling rack isn't for you, and that's totally cool. I was just trying to offer a different perspective and give you some ideas if you wanted to integrate a CRT into your setup, but didn't know the easiest way to do it. If you definitely decided that you want to try gaming or watching content on one, which I definitely would recommend, any way that you get it done will work. Whether it's the folding table in a basement idea, or even just measuring out different spots in a back room to see if one of these rolling racks will fit, any of that's a win, and it's certainly going to get you one step farther into getting one of these setups. The only other thing to add is PC VGA monitors, so these old CRT monitors that you would connect to your computer, are also excellent choices, but they cannot directly accept signals from VCRs or old game consoles. You would need to put it through some type of scaler. I have an entire video dedicated just to that I think would be a help if that's the path you want to go down. And another advantage of using those types of monitors is through some very cheap converters, you could connect modern PCs and consoles to them as well, for the lack of motion blur and the lack of lag, because any of those VGA CRT monitors are zero lag displays. But whatever reason you might want to get into CRTs or anything else, hopefully this video was able to point you in the right direction and give you some ideas. If you'd like to support the channel, this stuff is all kept alive by monthly support services, but you could also help out by spending no extra money than you normally would have. Let me show you how. Simply go to RetroRGB.com and click on support. If you'd like to support monthly, all of those links are right above, but if you scroll down to the eBay and Amazon links, you can click on either one of those and it'll bring you to the main page. I like copying and pasting everything after the question mark just to ensure that I'm able to keep that code going, but once you do that, just go and search for whatever it is that you were going to buy anyway. It will be the same price. The price will be identical to what it was without this affiliate code. But when you're checking out, maybe consider pasting that code back in again just to be sure, and we'll get a few pennies of the sale at no cost to you.